I did have the request from a few people who did register and let me know that they wouldn't be able to join this morning to ask if it was going to be recorded. So we are going to do that. I will follow up with an email to the link where we end up hosting the recorded version. So stay tuned for that. Feel free to share it out with your networks once you do get it. But that should be sent out to you in the next day or so after the meeting wraps up. So yeah, I'm going to thank you all for being here. My name is Matt Mandrusiak. I am on the board of the Alberta North chapter of CAGP. I'm in charge of programming, at least for the next couple of months until my term is up in June. So thank you very much for being a part of this session. I know it's we're seeing folks from all over the country join us today, so that's really exciting. And we've got three great presenters, the Meldrum brothers, who are going to talk about their life in philanthropy, both from a personal perspective growing up and from a professional standpoint now, all three involved in different functions of family philanthropy. So I think this is going to be a really interesting topic. Very excited to hear from the guys about their thoughts and experience within the sector. So I'm going to do a quick intro of Bryce, Steve, and Mike, and then I will turn it over to Steve, who's going to be running the PowerPoint presentation and have his brothers join him throughout the presentation. So Steve Meldrum is an insurance specialist with over 17 years of insurance advisory experience. He represented a national firm for 3 years before breaking into the independent planning world in 2006, and he hasn't looked back. I'm not going to read the full bio because you've probably seen it on the invite that went out, but I'll give you just a quick taste of the presenters who are going to be with us today. Steve's brother Bryce is a frontline fundraiser with more than 10 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. He began his career working with a small nonprofit based in Canada, supporting projects in Haiti and Ethiopia. In 2013, he joined the University of Alberta and took on various roles, including with Central Advancement, the Faculty of Engineering, and the Office of the Dean of Students. He's now in the position of Director of Advancement for the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry at the University of Alberta. And Mike Meldrum is a senior executive with 25 years of fundraising experience. He started his career in healthcare before moving to post-secondary education. In 2013, he completed his MBA and took a position of Associate Vice President of Advancement at NAIT. In 2019, Mike took the position of President and CEO of Canada Health Trust, and now Calgary Health Trust, and now the Calgary Health Foundation. So lots of experience in the room today. Looking forward to hearing from all three Meldrums about their fundraising and philanthropy background. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve, Bryce, and Mike for the presentation today. Take it away, guys.
Steve, you're on mute.
Rookie mistake. Thank you. I know everyone here is about engagement, and so I thought we'd get you engaged by using your chat button and trying to guess which one of us is the youngest. So if you want to throw that in the chat button, we're always curious as brothers who you think the youngest is. So if you have a minute, just throw it in the chat, and then I'll be taking us through a bit of a journey. So as brothers, we grew up in a family with about there were 7 children. Our parents were school teachers. My mom stayed at home most of the time. And, you know, we had everything we needed. But a real big focus was in the summers, we got to go on a backpacking trip with our dad. With 2 months off, we would go to a place. Does anyone know where this is a picture of? If you do, you can throw it in the chat. But it's Lake Francis. So if you go down to Waterton and you take a ferry to the US side, there's about a 10-kilometer hike, and you get to this backcountry site, and it's a horseshoe canyon with a beautiful waterfall at the back. There's a creek trickling in at the front there, and it's a great place. And we had tons of memories growing up there. Okay. Like I said, there was 7 kids. So here's a picture of the 4 brothers. So on the left, we have Bryce, I'm next, and then Mike. And then we have another brother who is Doug. And Doug's a chiropractor up in Calgary, but this is about the only shot we had from way back in 1994. So because we had this camaraderie as children, we really had great memories, skipping rocks, rowing out into the middle of the lake, catching fish, all that kind of fun. And it was a bit of a journey. If we fast forward, in about 2013, we started doing some of these trips again. And one of the trips in 2016 here is Ribbon Falls. You can see we're still smiling. We're all of the same height at this time, but I wanted to explain a couple things. I'm going to give you some backdrop. So this looks like we're having fun and an adventure, but this specific hike was a little bit different. Okay. So when we started this hike, I almost left my car door open, and then they told me I forgot something. So luckily I went back and I fixed that, locked the car and didn't leave it open. When we were about 10 kilometers in of the about 15-kilometer hike, Mike realized that he didn't have his keys, and we had set out our vehicles in different areas because it was not a looped hike. It was meant to carry through. So we'd already set a car at a different place. You notice this tarp that we have. We also noticed that the weather was inclement and was going to change. So we were feeling pretty confident about ourselves in setting up a makeshift tarp and a fire. And that evening, there was a bunch of other hikers that came as it started to pour rain. And luckily, they had refuge with us as well. The next morning, you can see there's all this snow that came down. All the snow crushed all the vegetation down, but we were able to get some great sunsets. And this is the end of our trip, is just showing how, again, we're still smiling. It was an adventure. And I think that that's what I want to highlight here is, although as kids we came together, and since then we've been able to share our wins and losses with each other and collaborate just on what we're doing in the planned giving space, there's always an adventure. This same hike, we actually saw Mother Moose and her cow as well. So we had rain, we had snow, we had sleet, we helped people, people helped us. We had beautiful sunsets, we had some trying times and some trying climbs as well. So I think that relates to most of us in the journey that we do in planned giving or philanthropy. And I'm going to speak a little bit more on my sandbox, which is life insurance, before I pass the torch to Bryce and the others. Now, I know in the planned giving space, a lot of people default to life insurance, and knowing that in a will, you're able to gift your life insurance. But I think it's important that we understand the mentality of life insurance and why people are buying it in the first place. There's 2 main aspects. On the left-hand side, we have the human capital side, and this is essentially protecting your earning income. So when, if a person, for example, made $100,000 a year, they're going to work for another 20 years. Arguably, their potential income is $2 million, 10 years times, or 100,000 times 20 years. Now, once a person's done quite well, they realize that they actually have assets. They have accumulated money, property, real estate, investment securities, all these kinds of things. And they start to have that financial capital. So the financial capital, sometimes the financial advisor wants to protect. And to do so, they can calculate the tax liability and cover that. Or if they want to keep the family cabin in play, they might put insurance to, equalize or distribute the estate in a different way. So there's a lot of reasons why people would buy life insurance. And why this comes into play next is to understand the different types. And I'll keep this pretty high level, but I'll compare it to real estate. Okay. Now, first off, you'll see there's a bunch of lines going on here, but I'll keep it real clean. There's a mortality line, which is easily saying the older you get, the more likely you are to die. Okay. And I think we all understand that. The gray line is like renting insurance. So just like real estate, you don't build up any equity and eventually it will expire. Okay. In our world, this is called term insurance. And usually it's to cover a temporary need. Again, perhaps your income or a business agreement that's short term or a mortgage, right? So renting is short term in nature. There's no equity built up, but it's quite affordable. The next type of insurance is more like ownership of real estate. It's more expensive. It can build up equity and it will never expire. Okay. You can use that equity in multiple different ways, which I'll touch into later on. But I want you to be able to recognize this graph because the likelihood of you passing away has not actually changed. It's just how quickly you can put the money in is what has changed. And the reason why is that bottom left line where the dollar sign is the insurance company is collecting additional premium so that in the future, when the mortality costs are greater, they have it covered. Okay. Now, in my world, I deal with a lot of clients that have been successful and they're in a position where they're focused on protecting their financial capital, or they're looking towards others and saying, how can I make an impact on others? Usually most clients, a big hot button is taxes. And I find that they want to save taxes now. They want to save taxes in the future. And they want to make sure that they save taxes when they transfer their wealth. And that transfer could be to their heirs of their estate, or it could be to a charity, an organization, so on and so forth. But they don't like taxes. I haven't met anyone yet with that. One of the key things in today's world, there's a lot of pressure in the last couple years with individuals as well as business owners because of the increase in tax rates and the taking away of the ability to split income with a shareholder or a spouse that's not working in the business or children. So some of the strategies that people used in the past are no longer there. So they're trying to get more creative. And I think bringing it back to the analogy of the hiking with my brothers, as children, we always went to the same hike. And that was fun and that worked to a degree. But as we got older, we wanted to explore different hikes and different avenues and ventures. And when we were able to do so, we had a totally different set of experiences. And I think brought us closer together. And I think that's what I want to introduce here is the idea of when you consider life insurance, don't look at it just like a gift to the estate, but look at it from different angles and different approaches to get a great result. Now, life insurance is like ice cream. Everyone loves ice cream. Just curious, again, trying to keep you awake and engaged. I'm curious if anyone can guess my favorite type of ice cream. And Matt or Bryce and Mike probably know, so they can watch the chat and confirm once that happens. But again, life insurance, although you're used to it going into the estate or the will, I'm going to think of it like there's a lot of other ways to build your ice cream cone. You can add different toppings. You can add chocolate sauce, sprinkles, coconut, and everyone loves the cherry on the top. Okay. And I think that's the key is when you're using life insurance in your planning, you don't have to understand all the intricacies, but you need to know that there are different toppings or approaches to it that you can apply. And donors aren't always aware of that. Regardless if they have an accountant or not, they're not always aware. So I'm just going to give you, in consideration of time, I'm going to give you one little nugget of from a business owner's perspective of perhaps they want to purchase their life insurance through their corporation. Why would they do this? It's because they can use cheaper corporate tax dollars. Okay. And you don't have to get really hardcore into the table here, but at the end of the day, it would be a lot cheaper if a business owner can use their corporation to pay for the insurance premium as opposed to them individually. And that's evident on the far right column, the required amount of income to pay that same premium. So if you have any business owners, this might be a consideration of, them purchasing that insurance through the corporation. And then here's another reason why that's beneficial. Okay. Simple slide. When the corporation earns income, they can put it inside the insurance policy. Anytime you have money inside an insurance policy, it grows tax sheltered. So just like a tax-free savings account, you could consider this a tax-free insurance account. So money can accumulate there without taxes. Okay. And then upon death, they can pay out the charity, the death benefit, but they still have a credit, which is something called a capital dividend account. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but if you work with other advisors, you just have to say those few words to them. Say, I want to learn about the capital dividend account. And they'll explain to you how the business can use their corporate dollars, the charity can receive the income, and then there's a credit on account with the business that allows them to take other funds underneath the tax line. That's what I'm trying to show under there, underneath the tax line, so that they can receive some of their assets without tax or crossing that tax line. So capital dividend account, a big key in our world. Now, to let my brothers speak too, I'll just give you some other highlights. Happy to answer some of these questions on or offline, but there's some other life insurance toppings. Of course, you can gift your life insurance. You could, when you do a gift, you can make sure you understand the fair market value. So whether it's a renting insurance or owning insurance, you can actually have value in it. So before your donors cancel their policy, they may want to talk to their advisor about if there's value that they could donate to that charity. I was just talking to the U of A about 2 weeks ago in their planned giving department, and they're very much aware of this and using it day by day. You can also take out a new insurance policy and you can get tax deductions or tax credits for the policy premiums that you pay. Another consideration, someone can just change the beneficiary on their policy. So if they want to maintain ownership or control, they can do that and just select the beneficiary and change the beneficiary as well. Next slide, maybe they want to gift their registered retirement income fund. A lot of donors, as they age, realize that they don't need money that comes from their RSPs or their RIFs. And when they die, all of that income gets taxed in the year of death. And so what they might want to consider doing is taking the RIF payments or increasing them, purchasing an insurance policy. And when they do so, although they've paid a lot of tax to do that, upon death, the life insurance policy can go maybe half to the estate and half to the charity. When you donate that half to the charity, there's going to be approximately a 50% tax credit, which would also reduce their overall taxes on the estate. So your net gain is further ahead as opposed to doing nothing. Another one we've heard and use is sometimes gifting your Canada pension plan. Same kind of idea. You can use those Canada pension plan payments to purchase an insurance policy. There's lots of other toppings. You can have, some people aren't aware that a private foundation or donor advised fund can also own an insurance policy or pay the insurance premiums. If you want, you can also put your money, leveraged your gift, where you put money into an insurance policy, but then you can immediately take some of that equity back out of the policy. And so a donor doesn't have to feel like they've had an expense of the life insurance premiums. They can say, I'm going to put it in, and they could advance out their equity, but in the background, there's a death benefit that's being created. Two more is insured annuities. This is when maybe you have a lump sum of money. Maybe they need to get it off of their financial statements, so they could purchase an annuity. And that annuity is a guaranteed income stream that could pay for the insurance premium. So rather than a person having to worry about remembering, they can just make one purchase and have that fully take care of the insurance policy. A little more advanced, happy to talk about this another time, is you can also consider return of premium benefits or also shared ownership. Shared ownership might be where I allocate the charity to receive the death benefit, but I can retain the equity, which is the cash value. So again, lots of toppings on that ice cream. I'm glad if you do use life insurance, but realize there's a lot of toppings you can put on there, a lot of unique ways that you can structure it. Everyone wants that cherry. You need to find what the cherry is for your donors and for your organization so that people can feel that regardless of the topping, they do receive that perk or that value that they're looking for. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bryce, and he's going to speak more to his aspect or area.
Thanks, Steve. Just so everyone knows from that poll, I am actually the youngest Meldrum brother. Often I get confused that I'm older than Mike, who's actually 10 years older than I am. So if you meet me in person, don't make that mistake, or I might have to be offended or something. But yes, as Matt introduced at the beginning, I work at the U of A, and I've been working there for 7 years. And so planned giving has kind of been a theme throughout my time at the U of A, and only a little bit prior to that, because I didn't know much about planned giving, but I'm very fortunate to work in a very mature planned giving program at the U of A. And so I just want to share a couple tips, things that I've learned from working around this. So the first thing is we can't be scared to talk about planned giving. You don't need to be a planned giving expert to talk about planned giving. And to me, it's important that donors hear about planned giving in multiple ways. They hear about it one-on-one with a fundraiser potentially, but that they also hear it in news stories or communications from a charity. I like to think of donors and how they interact with planned giving and most giving to be on a continuum. Some of them are just learning that planned giving is a way to give that's not writing a check. Some people are at the stage where they've included a gift in their estate plans and they've let the charity know about it. Most people are somewhere in between there. But as we talk to people about planned giving, about what it looks like, about how they could do it, about how other people have done it, we can move them along that continuum. I think in my experience, when I've had people be willing to make a planned gift and then talk about it to other people, it does a few things. It reinforces their gift to the charity if they're featured in a news story, for example, or if they come on a donor, they come as a donor on a donor visit with me to a potential new donor, and they're able to share their story. It reinforces that gift that they've made. For others, many people are shy about sharing their story until we let them know that by sharing their story, it can help others learn about this way of giving and might encourage them to make a similar gift. And then I find that they're often much more willing to share their story. Most people are modest. They don't want to talk about their giving in front of a bunch of people until they know that it can help inspire others. So I think it's really important to, as with anything we do in philanthropy, to always talk about the impact and outcomes. It's not the fact that that person made the gift, but it's the impact that gift, whether right now or that future gift, is going to have, that really inspires other people to get involved. Now, I mentioned that continuum that people are on. So just earlier this month, the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry held a planned giving event for a virtual planned giving event, our first one we've ever done for physicians. So we specifically reached out to alumni who got their MD degree from the U of A and invited them to come. And I put up some of the survey results, which you'll see there, that and what those survey results tell me. They tell us a lot of things, but that people want to consume information about giving and about planned giving in different ways. And most people want to learn about it before they're ready to talk to somebody about it. Great, Mark. Thanks for asking that question. We had 19 physicians attend, and 14 of those physicians filled out the survey. So I think it's important that that we look at our activities and say, is this activity helping someone move along that continuum? Okay, Steve, we can go to the next slide. Here's a couple tools that I like to use and that are part of the U of A's planned giving program. So when I'm in a donor conversation with somebody and we're talking about planned giving, I often use this language. I'll say something like, "Hey, Barbara, I know we're talking about your gifts, making a potential gift in your estate. Would it be helpful if I provided you with some sample will language that has been vetted by our legal team and that you could share with your legal team?" And every time I've done that, the answer's been yes. And so we have some standard sample will language where we insert the designation of where that donor wants to give, whether it's to the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry or somewhere else at the university. And that does two things. It makes it a lot more tangible for the donor. It provides us, if they say yes, it provides us with an opportunity to follow up. And it helps us control the next time we get a meet with that donor, which is always important. So we also, in the faculty or at the university, we have a couple documents called a gift confirmation form, where it's just a form where we allow a donor to provide written confirmation that that they have the intention of leaving a gift in their estate plans to the university. And that ties into the stewardship, which I'll get to on the next slide. We also offer a complimentary estate planning guide. You can go back a slide, Steve. We also have an estate planning guide that we share with donors, which allows them, it's a tool for them for planning their estate, but it also provides us with a little bit of information about how they would like to be stewarded. It's also important, I think, to work with trusted advisors. So Steve, for example, he had a client come to him that wanted to make a gift to the U of A. And so he had a brother that worked at the U of A. And so he gave me a call and we were able to work through that donor for whom anonymity was really important. She didn't want anyone at the U of A to know she was making a gift in her estate, but she wanted to make one to a specific area. And so because of that relationship I had with Steve, we were able to get that gift designated to a particular area that was really important to that donor and set that up. And she was able to preserve the anonymity that she wanted. Okay, Steve, we can go on to the last slide. So this is probably one of the most important things to keep in mind, and that's stewardship. So I've been talking mostly about bequests. That's the most common planned giving vehicle, and the one certainly that I've experienced the most in my career. It's really important that we steward people that have let us know that they've included us in their estate plans. Generally speaking, those gifts are revocable. And so they can change that. They could change that designation in their will and designate it to a different charity or designate it to family members. So if someone has told us that they've done that, we need to steward them effectively. And at the U of A, we look at the average. Well, I'll step back for a second. If someone has indicated that they've included us in their estate plan, sometimes they tell us the amount, sometimes they don't. If they don't tell us the amount, we look at the previous 5 years, the average planned gifts that have been realized, that have come in. And at the U of A, that's $140,000. So if somebody has indicated that they've given us a planned gift or have designated us in their estate and they haven't told us the amount, we put in a placeholder value that helps us gauge what level we should steward them at. So we steward those donors as if they've made a $140,000 gift. And so I think that's really important and provides a guide to us on how we steward them. So I'll leave it there for now. I see some questions coming in, but maybe I'll turn it over to Mike and then we'll take those questions at the end.
Okay, thanks, Bryce. Steve, if you can, yeah, so thank you. Advance the slide. So my first joke was going to be, you could see that I don't have much creativity in my PowerPoint, but I see my brother has tried not to make me look bad by adding some graphics. So that's awesome. So anyway, really happy to be here today. Thanks for having us, Matt. And one of the things I wanted to just make clear is that I wouldn't consider myself a plan giving expert. So take a grain of salt with some of my observations about it, but I have been involved in lots of different areas over the last 20 plus years. I started my as an annual giving professional back in 1995, and so I have been quite involved in planned giving, but I wouldn't call myself an expert just because I haven't deep technical expertise and haven't done hundreds of reps. Like I haven't confirmed a ton of gifts, although I certainly have done several. So next slide. Steve. So I just thought it would be helpful for people to see to say a little bit about my perspective of the evolution of planned giving over the last 20 years. And I've had a different perspective. As I said, I started with an annual giving professional, so didn't have much to do at all with gift planning. But as I moved into major gifts, did several years in major gifts at the U of A and also at the University of Lethbridge prior to that. And so had some planned giving experience, much the experience that Bryce sort of comments on, of sort of in the trenches, meeting with the donors, trying to introduce the topic that at the time seemed quite a scary topic to broach about sort of planned giving and end of life giving. But I have that experience. But then when I was at the U of A, I was the Director of Development Services for a few years and managed the planned giving portfolio. And then now also at NATE, and then now at Calgary Health Foundation, I have some oversight of that program. So one of the things I noticed is that early on, the planned giving was sort of a bit of mystique around it. There was this sort of mystery about planned giving, and it was like, usually people that had sort of a legal or more accounting background were involved in it, and it usually when people would, major gift officers would be engaging with a donor, they'd want to hand it off to that planned giving expert as soon as possible. So there was this idea that there was sort of, it operated a bit as a silo, and it was very much, sort of these unique expertise that never would the major gift officers be smart enough to understand. And and that was sort of the early days to me. And there was also really nice brochures. So they, I was in annual giving, as I said, so we did the cheapest direct mail pieces we could get out the door, and they did the super glossy, sort of high finish stuff that we were always jealous of. So that was sort of my first experience. And one of the things that I did while I was at the U of A is I brought in Lorna Summers and Frank Minton, and some of you will recognize Lorna is sort of they're pioneers of plan giving. Lorna at McMaster, and then Frank Minton was in Washington, I think, down in the US. But I brought them in to do a review of our plan giving, and it was a pretty critical review of plan giving at the U of A at the time. They basically said that this model of a siloed plan giving office was old, and the way to be successful was to empower the major gift officers to be successful, to understand it, to start the conversations. And that not only, and that really the technical piece, and I know everyone on this call knows this, that the technical piece is though important and at the right time, it was really about the donor motivations that people needed to understand. And it was about, helping the organization to be comfortable having the conversations with their donors so they could advance it. And I really saw that evolution. And now I think most, mature programs really see all of their frontline fundraisers as plan giving officers to some extent, and they want to give them the tools to have those conversations and to advance things. The other big trend that I've seen lately, and when I say lately, probably last 10 years, it's really picked up steam. There was a book written by a couple people, but I think one of them was Fraser Green, called Iceberg Philanthropy, and it's the idea that there's a lot of people out there that would be willing to make planned gifts, and they just don't understand it. And so it's about understanding who are the best prospects for planned giving, using data analytics and cultivating them with a very strategic way of sort of engaging them, educating them, as Bryce talked about, helping them to navigate that sort of continuum of education where they'll be led to, I can do this, and make their gift. And so I've seen in the last while, there's a lot more sort of data analytics and marketing involvement and engagement, and a lot more upstream cultivation for planned giving, rather than sort of the typical, if someone's a major gift for long enough, eventually you're going to have the topic of planned giving come up. But, I think people are recognizing that there's a lot more planned giving prospects out there than we thought. And if you strategically use digital marketing and traditional sort of multi-channel marketing, you can identify those interests and begin cultivating them much earlier. And then it helps you, because you can, you have more time to sort of build that, educate them, and bring them along. And finally, one of the things that, and I've read a few articles on this, is it used to be that, the best prospect for a planned gift was a major gift donor. And so people would, the traditional model would be sort of focusing in on all your major gift donors and talking to them about planned giving. But there's some good research out there that actually indicates that your loyal, long-term annual giving donors are the best prospects, most likely to give planned gifts. And so again, a bit of an argument for who your greatest prospects are, and moving upstream with your marketing to engage those annual giving donors to educate them early on. So next slide, Steve. And I'm just going to say a little bit about the case study of the Calgary Health Foundation, because I found it interesting. I've been there just under 2 years. And so just a little bit by way of my background is I actually worked for the Calgary Health Foundation. Back in the day, it was the Foothills Hospital Foundation back in 1995, and then it merged in 96 to become the Calgary Health Trust. And just recently, we changed our name to the Calgary Health Foundation. It's a bit of a rebranding exercise. But this is to say that I kind of came back to the organization after being away for 20 plus years. So real interesting experience to sort of come away and then to come back, or to go away and come back to the organization. But, one of the things that I noticed when I first came back was that while the planned giving program at the Calgary Health Foundation was fairly small, and I'll give you some numbers just to give you a sense. So we have, at the moment, we have about 150 expectancies, confirmed bequests, that is. And over the last 10 years, so that's quite a period of time, over the last 10 years, we've had 78 gifts for a total of $26 million. So, and if you sort of take out the outliers there, our average gift over the last 10 years, if you take out a few of the really high estate outliers, it's about 148,000. So not too different from the U of A there. But that gives you a little bit of the stats. So I would describe it as a mature plan giving program, but not a big one, not near the size of the U of A or probably even the U of C. But it was a mature program. And one of the things that we purchased before I arrived back in 2015 is they actually signed up, and this isn't plugging any companies. There's lots of different vendors. I'll let you do your own homework, but they had engaged legacy leaders with a contract that was a few $100,000, and it was an investment over about 4 years, 3 to 4 years, and had some pretty significant results. I'll mention just a few numbers about it. So it started with a total prospect pool of 4,700 individuals, and the people that they could reach were about 2,300, and it ended up with 278 new sort of identified commitments. So they may have been pre-existing commitments, but those 278 recognized. And when we actually do the valuations of the projected sort of dollars, it's about an $8.8 million sort of expectancy from the investment of that program, or about, if you use net present value, about a 15% cost to raise the dollar. And so it was a pretty significant program. It was an expensive program for us, but it did a lot of great work for us as far as identifying a ton of people that we can now meet with and talk, and that had effectively been moved along that educational journey. So one of the other things I would say about the Calgary Health Foundation specifically is we're a small organization, 30 staff, under 30 staff, 29 staff, and we have one plan giving officer. And so there's a lot that person needs to do, right? They need to engage allied professionals. They need to do ongoing stewardship of existing donors, and they need to find new donors and empower the major gift officers, and then do all the new marketing stuff I talked about. So one of the things that I've done recently, and people can sort of watch this, it's sort of a living case study, is, and some people won't like what I've done, maybe, or think that I was unwise in doing it, but I did it very strategically, is within our organization, we have a vice president of development, and I moved plan giving, and that oversees the major gifts, for example, but I moved plan giving away from the major gifts group and put it into the strategic giving area, which runs all the annual giving, as well as is connected with the engagement and advocacy, so the marketing and communications functions. And for the very reason I talked about is I think that there's a lot more plan gifts out there for our organization than we know about, and we need to do a much better job of the funnel and marketing and bringing people along. And so that was a strategic move, and our plan giving officer is there. I will say that while that is technically a move from a reporting line standpoint, they will continue to be very engaged with major gifts and empowering that group. So that's a little bit about sort of a big move that we've made recently. One of the things that I think is just critical to our success is to build the knowledge of plan giving as an option, and to talk about it more, as Bryce said, because I don't think people talk about it as often. So that's really it. I want to make sure we leave lots of time for questions. So that's it for me.
So thank you, all three of you, for the pieces of your presentation. Certainly, I thought very, very informative from a number of different sides. I know there's a couple of questions, at least I put one into the chat box, but if there are some more, I hope our group would open up and ask a few more. But I had a question for Bryce. You mentioned during your discussion that you would bring donors who have committed to a plan gift into meetings with potential other donors as you're having that discussion. How often do you do that? And has it been successful? Is there like a stable of donors that are willing to have that conversation, or how do you go about securing that type of support?
Sure. So I wouldn't say it's very common, but I think it can be used more than it's currently being used right now. I think more often what we do is we have events, virtual or in-person events, where the subject is giving or planned giving. And into those events, we will insert a donor who will talk about why they gave, their motivation, their passion for giving. And so it's a donor to donor scenario where the audience members who are potential donors or planned givers are hearing from someone that is a fellow alumni or same profession, same age, same gender, whatever it may be. And they can say, oh, if that person can do that, then I can see myself doing that as well. But I think there is lots of opportunity for when you have that right donor that is willing to share their story, to bring them on a donor visit. And for the right prospective donor that would be comfortable welcoming another person in, I think it's a great option.
Can I jump in, Matt, with a question, or did you want to go to the?
No, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Thanks, guys. That was a great presentation. A couple questions. I think one for Bryce and one for Mike. So, with respect to stewardship, when you have a great degree of data to extract from in order to determine your $140,000 valuation, my question is, when you have very limited data to really understand what the planned gift expectancy is, how do you suggest categorizing that donor? And then the question for Mike is more from a board reporting perspective, in terms of what type of roll-up information are you providing your board with respect to planned gift expectancies? And I guess, how do you frame it in a way, and your board may be sophisticated enough to appreciate the investments that you've made, like the $200,000 investment into prospect identification, but maybe just walk through the way in which you report up the importance of planned giving to a very long-term strategy. And then I'm going to throw in a third question, if you don't mind, because I remember this from my days at the U of A. Bryce, back to you, is how do you categorize planned giving prospects with age, things like that? Because I remember O'Neill Otar was very aggressive on some of those things. So 2 questions for Bryce: stewardship, demographics, and then 1 question for Mike around reporting up. Sorry, I did 3 questions in one.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for those questions. They're great questions. So I think there's a couple ways to approach that lack of data to know what that dollar figure is. And I think you have to work with what you have and work with how your stewardship works right now. So if your stewardship is set up to steward major gift donors, then I would lump planned giving donors and just treat them like they're major gift donors and assign a value, pick a value, whatever it is, but write it down, make a policy, and then revisit it in 3 years when you have more data. But if you just say, oh, we're going to treat them different, but you don't have a way to treat them different,
Right.
then you'll end up not doing anything with them and not giving them any stewardship. So if you have a stewardship mechanism for major gift donors, then lump them in with that, whatever your threshold for being a major gift donor is within your faculty, or sorry, your organization, make it at that value, and then treat them accordingly and provide them with that stewardship. Invite them to the events that those donors get invited to, provide them access to leadership like donors of those levels would. As far as how we assess or identify potential planned giving donors, there's probably people on this call from the U of A that could answer this question better than me, but we look, age is a big predictor. Like, people think about making a planned gift typically later in life. So that is one data point that we look at, and we are fortunate at the U of A to have graduation dates for a lot of people. And so we're able to estimate age based on graduation date. But to what Mike said earlier, people that are repetitive givers is a huge flag for me. And it doesn't matter amount, $10 a month, $20 a month, whatever it is, or $50 every year in December. That regular giving shows that they care about, they're with your organization through thick and thin, through leadership changes. They love your organization for whatever reason. And so it behooves us to go and talk to them. But also to what Mike said and what I said earlier, I think you have to cast the net wide and give people opportunities to learn about planned giving, open up that funnel so that everybody's hearing about planned giving, not just people that are 55 and older, but make it a part of how you talk about giving to anybody that you're talking about giving. It's an option. And that person that's 30 years old or 25 years old may hear about it now, but then when they hear about it again, by the time they're 55, they've heard about it 7 times and they're ready to engage with it.
Thank you.
So on to my question. Just before I get to my question, I just want to jump on, I can't resist jumping on one of the earlier question you mentioned, Mark. I think sometimes, around stewardship of planned giving donors, and Bryce made this point, but sometimes we use labels and they're to our detriment, right? We'll call them an annual giving donor, a planned giving donor, a major gift donor, and we think that they're entirely different people. I mean, if people lives long enough, it can be all of those, right? And it's the same inherent foundational motivations that drive all of that activity. So to Bryce's point about, put them in with major gifts, just make sure you're doing something with them, right? Don't miss them. With respect to the board comment, so I would say we do not provide a great line of sight to planned giving to our board right now. So, and I think historically,
do you think you should be from a governance perspective? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and there's a few reasons we haven't yet, and I'm not sure to what degree before I came that there was. I mean, obviously, before the board invested a few $100,000 in legacy leaders, there probably was a conversation at the board, but I wasn't around then. So I don't know that. Maybe it was just folded into operations and the board didn't have line of sight. But I would say right now, my board's sort of line of sight and understanding of planned giving is quite rudimentary. We do talk about it. We share anecdotes and certainly we tell stories about things, but there's different levels to this stuff. And some organizations are very mature and they'll actually quantify their planned gifts and use it in their campaign counting, as the U of A does, and they'll use it in their annual fundraising metrics, and it'll actually be tied right into their KPIs. I think that is the way to go. I think you want to be conservative in your estimates and you need to manage that. But I think that's a direction that we're definitely going to go. But we have a long ways to go in educating our board around planned giving. And I would just say that it's very valuable because not only are they, I find that they're quite interested. In our case, we have a board of about 20, up to 25 people. We always have a couple of lawyers that are interested in planned giving and a plate on the other side. And so it actually helped us to have a more mature planned giving program, but it's been more as one-offs. And obviously they're great prospects for planned gifts themselves, the board members. So there's lots of reasons to educate them. And ideally it's rolled in some way as quantified within your KPIs so that it's something that they regularly see. But for us right now, it's not there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I could answer Courtney's question.
Sure.
So she asked about, she's new to planned giving and there's lots of vehicles for planned giving, but where she's new and it's a small shop. So where do you start or where do you focus your time? So my number 2 would be bequests and gifts of security. And then as a caveat to that, have really good relationships with allied professionals like Steve or financial planner, lawyer, etc. So if an and so in my experience, like 99% of the planned gifts that I've been involved in have been bequests or gifts of security. I know enough from attending talks like Steve's and others about insurance is an option, other things are. And so if I speak with a donor that is interested in that, I know it's a possibility. I know some of the advantages of it and where and opportunities where it might work well. And then if they're interested in pursuing that, then right away, I would say we need to engage with an allied professional that knows some of the more of the nitty gritties to this. So I guess to answer your question, I would focus on bequests and gifts of security and know enough about the other vehicles to recognize when it's an opportunity and then who you're going to talk to for the details.
I just would agree with Bryce 100%. I think you need to be able to create your network. You need to be able to plant seeds, and you never know when you're going to use those relationships or when they'll come in handy. I find it interesting that even Mike, when he worked at the Calgary Hospital Foundation, I think you called it, and then 20 years later, you're leading that organization. So just interesting. You never know where it's going to end up or how it's going to play out. But I would say to that point, Courtney, you don't need to know it all. You just need to know that there's something out there. Ask lots of questions. Be willing to, lean on people, lean on others. But as long as you have that relationship and that trust, I think your donors are willing to go on the journey with you or introduce you to their accountant or their lawyer. I mean, we do this every day. When just this last week, we had a new client come to us and we said, hey, part of our process is we just like to talk to your accountant just for 10 or 15 minutes, understand that what they're doing and what we're trying to do. Let's make sure that we're rowing the boat in the same direction. So I think that's an important thing. I'm going to skip down, and Mike and Bryce, you're welcome to bounce in, or Matt. But April had a couple questions on just how do you educate yourself tax-wise, and how to educate your clients. I think in today's world, of course, there's webinars. You can Google various things, but you don't have to go it alone. I want to bring in the hiking analogy. If I said to you, let's all go on the West Coast Trail, some people would say, let's do it. I've done it before. Some people would say, that sounds hard. I don't want to do it. But if we meet people where they're at, and try and educate them, maybe you need to talk about donating a security. And they might say, what's a security? Right? You just have to train people and eventually hope that they can go on the West Coast Trail with you. But don't worry about having something big and splashy. I think just adding value at every increment and every conversation, both value from the relationship side, but also something to have them ponder and think about, is what I would add in there.
Sure. So April, I can answer the second half of your question here. How often are we involving family members in the stewarding of planned gifts before and after they come to realization? So I think this is an area where we're striving to get better. I think the old school way was talk to the male donor and engage him around planned giving and giving generally, and we leave out their spouse and we leave out their family, and we just focus on them. I think we're getting better at that. Some of our stewardship practices are really changing at the U of A, and as we're going through that planned giving process with them, really understanding if there's a stewardee beyond them or their spouse that we should be reporting to on the impact and outcomes of the gift once they are passed on. And people really appreciate that. It's something that they probably have not thought of. But it builds a lot of trust when we bring it up. It represents more work on behalf of the organization to say, hey, when you pass on and this gift comes to us, who can we tell about it? Or who should we be telling? Is it your kids, your nieces, your nephews? So I think that's really important. And as with any kind of giving, involving the spouse is absolutely the right thing to do. Just a couple of weeks ago, a team member closed just a lifetime gift, $50,000 endowment towards diabetes research. And the major gift officer had the forethought to say, hey, when this gift comes in, this is what's going to happen. We're going to set up this endowment. There's some paperwork. Would your spouse, would your partner also want to be a part of, have their name on this document? So if something happens to you, then we're communicating with them about this gift you've made. And the person said, I would really like that. Please do that. The next time they had the conversation, that donor's partner said, okay, I'm going to put in $50,000 myself. So in a matter of a week, that gift doubled from $50,000 to $100,000 because they engaged the other half of the family.
Yeah, that's great, guys. I see a couple of other questions. One that was sent to me directly, so I'll just ask it on behalf of this person. It's for Mike. Out of curiosity, regarding the move of the planned giving officer to the strategic giving department, which other functions are part of the strategic giving team?
Yeah, so the strategic giving team, I probably didn't do a very good job of explaining that, but the strategic giving team, it used to actually also be under the development portfolio, but it was recently moved under engagement and advocacy, which is effectively marketing and communications. And we're doing quite a bit of work on our digital communications and on our traditional media sort of communications and marketing around our new brand. And so we brought in the strategic giving, which was strategic giving historically had been, again, it was under development, but it had included annual giving, planned giving, and prospect research. Prospect research stayed with development in the major gift side, and planned giving and strategic giving moved under the marketing communications function effectively.
Thank you. And I think just the last question that we've got in the chat right now is from Melissa. Bryce, can you comment on how many of those bequest gifts are to be endowed?
So I don't have the data in front of me, so this is going to be I can't back up my answer very well, but I guess from my experience, I would say a majority, maybe 75% are endowed. But it really matters to what I try to focus on what the donor wants to accomplish with making their gift. If they want to create a permanent legacy for them and their family that will last in perpetuity, then endowing in a fund that's going to do XYZ is the way to go. If they want to have impact on cancer research, well, make that gift expendable, because then that researcher can have access to those funds right away, and not just whatever the endowment's going to produce on a forever basis. So I always go back to the donor and say, and have them, through the questions I ask them, describe the kind of impact and outcomes they want their gift to have. And when I understand that, then I'm in the best position to recommend endowed versus not endowed.
Awesome, thank you. That's great answer. I know Melissa commented thanks as well in the chat. Just one final thing, I guess, before we wrap up, because I think we're getting near the end of the time. For Steve, you never told us what your favorite ice cream was earlier in the presentation.
Oh, yeah, cookies and cream all the way.
I was wrong. I said strawberry. I was wrong. Besides that, just really quickly, before I thank you guys and we wrap up, there was some discussion, and it's been mentioned quite a few times, that engaging an advisor, a professional advisor, is always a smart thing to do as you're having these conversations with your donors. That is a function that your local CAGP chapter can help with. And on a national level as well. There's a lot of really great advisors that are a part of our CAGP community. So if there are some questions that do come up, certainly you can reach out to someone on the CAGP executive or take a look at the website. And now you've got some other contacts to be able to reach out to and ask some questions for as well. So something to keep in mind if you do have some questions about taxes or planned giving or anything like that. Besides that, I'd really like to thank Steve, Mike, and Bryce for their time. I see that they've left their contact info in the chat and asking you to feel free to reach out at any point if you have questions. So feel free to take down their names, emails, and phone numbers. I can also send those out when I follow up with the group with the recording in the next couple of days. On that follow-up email, I will also send a link to our next CAGP presentation, which will be taking place on April 27th at 12 noon Edmonton time, where we'll have Jenny Mitchell presenting to our group, and her topic is going to be the money mindset, overcoming limiting money beliefs to raise more money than you ever thought possible. So I'll send out a link to that presentation as well. So thank you all for joining us for this past 75 minutes or so, and a huge thank you to Steve, Bryce, and Mike for taking the time to share some of their expertise in planned giving and their experience with us today. So thank you guys very, very much. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and we will talk again soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Matt.